So I had the awesome privilege of growing up in Texas, whereas we know football is just about a religion, right? Not quite, but almost a religion. How many of you guys were Houston Oilers fans? Okay, how many of you became fans once they became the Titans? All right, so some of us still aren't quite on board for that. So regardless of which team it is that you like, I'm sure that you're comfortable with and familiar with that whole roller coaster of celebrating the wins when your team wins, gritting your teeth and dreading that whole fumble, dreading the losses, dreading the seasons that don't go well. Isn't that just like life and leadership? Where we have those celebrations, we have those roller coasters of the things that go well and the things that don't go well. I remember as a child growing up in Texas, sitting on the couch with my father watching football. And like I said, Texas, so it's a religion. So my father, who was a retired major, was also an avid sports fan. And I remember that there was 3 teams that we watched. One was the Pittsburgh Steelers. Not sure why. Okay, all right. The other 2 that we watched, of course, because we were Texas, was the Dallas Cowboys. Any fans? Really? Okay, we'll talk later. And then also, of course, the Houston Oilers. Okay, we already established that one. Also, I had the privilege of going to high school at Socorro High School there in El Paso, Texas. Our colors at Socorro High School, we need to talk. So our colors were actually the same colors as the Houston Oilers, that Columbia blue. So it was almost like one of the things of being a Houston Oilers fan was already going to be ingrained. It was almost like it's in my DNA. It wasn't an option. It was just the way that it was going to be. And so I used to sit on the couch as a child. I'm the youngest of 4 girls. Used to sit on the couch watching football with my father. And I remember me sitting on the couch eating popcorn, you know, that smell of that fresh made popcorn, and my father sitting in his lazy boy recliner that I can still kind of imagine the smell of his Marlboro cigarettes in that big recliner because only he could sit in that chair. So it always smelled like Dad's cigarettes. And I remember the lessons now, looking back, that I learned from watching football with Dad. At the time, I had no idea that I was learning anything other than about football. But when we think about it, whether it's football or in any other team sport, there are so many things that we can learn from a team sport. So when we think about the idea that we're part of something, that collective success, kind of like the Kentucky State motto, united we stand, divided we fall, and the idea that we've got to do this together. As Dr. Welter said, everyone on that team has a part that they have to play. And if they don't play their part, there's no way that we could hope to win. So it's all about that collective success. We learn accountability, we learn adaptability, we learn resilience, all the things that you would expect to learn through a team sport, through being part of a team, whether on the field or in the business world. One of the big things, though, that we also learn is that camaraderie. And it's the whole idea of what we're willing to do for that team, that we're willing to sacrifice our bodies, put ourselves out there to be hurt, all for hopefully more than $1 a game, but all because of we're part of that team. It's not just about the paycheck, it's about being a part of that team. So there are tons of lessons that we can learn from being on a team sport. What can we learn from a team in transition? So as I mentioned, I am a Houston Oilers fan, and in the late 1990s, the owners of the Houston Oilers wanted bigger and better for his team. Who wouldn't? He wanted a state-of-the-art stadium. He wanted, you know, all of the best, all of the biggest. I mean, it is Texas. Everything is bigger and better in Texas. So he wanted all of those things. They didn't agree. So what did Adams do? He took his little red wagon, took his ball, and he moved his team to Tennessee. They moved, complete new, you know, finding a new religion. You pretty much, you know, excommunicated from that religion and had to join a new religion. They played for 2 years in Tennessee as the Tennessee Oilers, before finally becoming the Tennessee Titans. So when we think about that transition that they made, defining a whole new fan base, the idea of adapting to a new city, new state, ways of doing things, trying to rebrand, trying to get people back on board with your team, trying to get that new followership. Isn't that just like in business? Business doesn't exist to stay stagnant. It's always about growing and adapting and changing and getting better. So leading in transition for a football team is just like leading in business. It's always about, if we're going to thrive in that transition, we've got to make sure that we've got grit, that we've got trust, and that we understand emotional intelligence. So let's start with grit. Angela Duckworth defined grit as a combination of passion and perseverance for long-term goals. And I agree. However, I think that there's one other thing that we must add. We must add passion. To that passion, we must add purpose. Why do we have to have purpose? Without that purpose, we could be persevering towards the wrong thing. Let me give you a scenario. Imagine a 36-year-old female, yours truly, 1 year of being an administrator, assistant principal, and at age 36, I had the awesome honor, privilege, and absolute challenge of becoming the first Black elementary school principal in a Northeast elementary school, I won't name the district, since post-desegregation. I had the challenge of walking in an awesome principal who had been in the building for 20 years. At the age of 36, there were some teachers who had been teaching longer than I had been alive. That school was rich in tradition. And when I say rich in tradition, it wasn't just what they did, it was who they were. When I was hired, the superintendent told me, Carolyn, I expect you to put into action the literacy initiative that the rest of the district had been working on for the past few years. That school had not been working on that initiative because it didn't align with the traditional strategies and pedagogy and the whole idea of the way that we should be doing things. I went to that building and I had to start this initiative. I recall one afternoon sitting in my office after school was over, and I had a teacher come in my door. And she said, I just want to remind you that myself and several other teachers had a hand and who was not in your chair. I said, thank you. There was another time when I got paged over the intercom to come to a classroom after school. Went up to the classroom, and when I walked in, there was an entire room full of teachers. So I walked into a situation where they wanted to inform me very politely that this new initiative that I was pushing, that when the scores dropped, and they would drop, is the way that it was explained, that it would be you as the new administrator that they're looking at. So it was challenge after challenge after challenge. And so you might wonder, why did you keep going back? Why did you keep doing what you were doing? Why did you persevere? I understood my passion. I understood my purpose. I understood my why. I knew that for every child in that building, their education determined where they were going to be. And I believed wholeheartedly that the traditional way of teaching, do you guys remember the books, the See Dick Run and, Chase That Ball? Everyone in your room had the exact same book when you were reading, right? When you were learning to read. Do you think that everyone sitting next to you was at the same place in their learning as you were? But we taught in the middle. So with this new initiative, what we were looking at doing was actually meeting children where they were. It was about differentiating instruction. Much like when you're working with a team in business and you know that all of your members on your team are not the same. Just like when you're working with your own children in your house, you know that the approach that you take with your isn't always the same, that you have to adapt it for the person that you're working with. And that's what the new initiative was about, differentiated instruction, but it was about meeting children where they were. And I knew that if we were going to hope to have a future of children who would someday be the people, pushing my wheelchair and giving me my medicine in the old folks home. I wanted to make sure they could read the medicine label. So I needed to make sure that I was doing my part of what I could do to help meet them where they were, to get them to where we knew that they needed to be. So that purpose was greater than any challenge that I was presented with. That purpose is what kept me coming back. So passion and perseverance, absolutely. But without the purpose, we're not going to get to where we need to be. So grit is the strength to keep showing up because the work matters. When I was working on my dissertation, I read about a lady by the name of Jeannie Hodges, who was also from that Northeast area. She was an extraordinary, ordinary person. And I remember having a conversation with her in one of the interviews that I did with her. And I asked her, how did you just keep coming back? She was the first Black employee at an elementary school after desegregation. And I said, how did you just keep coming back? She was also volunteering in her neighborhood, making sure that everyone else had a better opportunity than she had had. And I asked her again, how do you just keep on coming back? And she finally told me in her own words, she says, well, Carolyn, I'm just not a give up type of person. And she said that if I don't do my part to make sure that I leave this world better than I found it, living with pain. You guys know the song by Mahalia Jackson? Was her favorite song, mine too. So the whole idea was that she was the embodiment of grit because she didn't give up. She kept on coming back. She kept on doing what she could, her small part, to do what she needed to do. How do you do that? Well, one tool you can use is a follow-through framework. And when we think about that framework, we think about our purpose first. That's our why. So when we think about the football player on that field, and we think about them going through those 2-day practices, all of the summer season, the weight room, all of those things that they've got to do, and we think about why do they show up, why do they do those things, that why is why they're on that team. And then the pressure. You do not have to engineer the pressure. That's that blitz. That's all the challenges coming at you. Whether you them or not, they're coming. They're usually all coming at the same time at 100 miles an hour, coming straight for you. That's when that quarterback gets ready to go back and make that throw, sees all of those people coming at him from the offensive line. Sorry, defense. Offensive line coming at him, but he still delivers the ball, even though he knows he's about to get hit. That persistence. That's what gets the ball over the goal line. That persistence is what makes you able to do what you need to do. So grit is that intentional choice. Thank you. Grit is that intentional choice that we make every single day to keep coming back, to keep doing what we're doing because we know that the mission matters. So consistency is actually grit in action. It's that daily choice, that daily intentional choice of continuing to show up, regardless of the challenges, regardless of the obstacles, and showing up and doing what needs to be done. Integrity. Integrity that builds trust. I would love to say that I always get this right, but I try only to lie about my weight and my age. So this is an instance where I absolutely got this one wrong. As a new administrator in that elementary school, I had a teacher. Let me first say that I absolutely believe that she loved what she did. I believe that she absolutely was there for the right reasons. However, she didn't believe that there was possibility of ever doing something different than the way that she was doing it. And I don't mean that because she was arrogant. I believe that she truly believed that what she was doing was the right way and that everything else had to be wrong. And this teacher also, when we start thinking about the way that we communicate, I believe that she loved children, but it didn't always come across in her voice. Let's say that if her communication were a song, it was often off-key, off-beat, and the most important words were often forgotten and sung way too loudly. I recall a time that I was in a conference with her. It was a parent-teacher administrator conference. And we had a parent, or shall I say a mama bear, that was very passionately explaining how this teacher was not there for their child and very passionately explaining why she believed that that teacher was not qualified to be teaching her child. She didn't cuss her out. She didn't go that far. She did call her a liar. And like I said, she was absolutely passionate about telling her how ineffective she was at teaching. I lost my teacher's trust that day because I stayed silent. My teacher should have been able to trust me to have her back. My teacher should have been able to trust me to speak up and defend her. Part of me believed and agreed with what the parent was saying. Not all of it, but part of me did. And in that moment, I struggled with, am I supporting the parent who I'm charged to support? Or am I supporting my teacher who I'm charged to support? And on that day, I lost that teacher's trust. I was no longer deserving of her trust. My silence screamed in that room. My silence spoke volumes. Like the Reverend Dr. King says, silence is a very powerful thing, and it did not play in my favor that day. I was at that elementary school for 5 years. I don't believe I ever regained her trust. I'm not sure I ever deserved to regain her trust. And so one of the first lessons that I recall about being a leader, about being a school administrator, was unfortunately that day. And I still remember it, like I said, as if it were yesterday. The thing about it is once we lose trust, what we often forget is that trust is the currency of leadership. No matter what processes you put in place, no matter what systems you have in place, if your team does not trust you, they will not follow you. And if your team doesn't follow you, are you really leading? So what can we do about that? One of the things is simply being aware. At least that's the first step. So if we were to use a 3-question audit and consider these 3 questions, the first one, do I do what I say I'm going to do? So in other words, if I say it is so, can they trust that it's going to be so? If I say I'm going to do this, are they going to know that it's going to be done? So do I do what I say I'm going to do? The second question, do I listen to understand, or do I merely listen to prepare my reply? Because there is a difference. When you're listening to understand, it's not just about you. It's about that collaboration. It's about wanting to know exactly what they're thinking as well, and understanding that you value what they're saying. That it's not just simply a matter of the, okay, yeah, I'm supposed to listen to you, so I'm going to give you the nod and the smile, and then I'm going to tell you what I was thinking the whole time. The question is, are you listening to understand? The third thing is, do the people on your team feel safe bringing their concerns to you? Whether they're concerns that you might be wrong, or if it's just suggestions. Do they feel safe? Do they believe that what they tell you is going to be received? Or do they believe that you're going to bite their head off, or that you're just going to dismiss them? Do they feel safe? If you will, take just a moment and rate yourself on all 3 of these questions. Give yourself a 3 for each question if you do these things, if you do it consistently. So for the first one, do you consistently do what you say you're going to do? Do you consistently? Or do you sometimes do like me and you say you're going to send that email with all great intention and you forget? That's kind of like, that fumble, on the 1-yard line. Give yourself a 2 if you do it sometimes. Give yourself a 1 if you do it rarely. So you're going to add up for each one of those. A 3 for consistent, a 2 for sometimes, a 1 for rarely. Add them all up. Just keep that number in your mind for a second. I know we'd love to be a 10, but none of us walk on water, so 9's as good as we can get. So now that you've got that number in your mind, here's the real question. What would your team say if I asked them? Would your team agree with the score that you came up with? And that's not about placing guilt. It's about looking for an area to start growing. It's about considering and being aware of the other people that you're working with the people that you're leading, and their perception. We don't have to discuss the fact that perception is reality. We all know that. It's their reality at least. So even if you believe that you're trustworthy, if they don't, that's all that matters, right? And the thing is that trust is built in those small, consistent actions, but it's also lost in the exact same way. So when you think about those three questions, do I do what I say I'm going to do? Do I listen to understand or just to reply? And does my team feel safe bringing their concerns to me? Today's Friday, so take a second and think about what can you do next week to build trust with your team. What's one small action you can take? Emotional intelligence. This is where leadership gets real human, you guys. Emotional intelligence. When we think about the whole idea of that self-awareness, how can we lead others if we're not aware of ourselves? When we think about that self-regulation, do you guys remember that children's story, Alexander and the horrible, no good, very bad day? Well, those days, thank you, those days don't just happen to Alexander. Those days happen to us too as grown-ups, right? And you get up in the morning and just everything is wrong. Everything is going wrong. And so when we think about the whole idea of self-regulation, it's a matter of, can I check that at the door? Or if I don't check it at the door, can I at least be aware of the fact that just because you didn't say good morning, or just because you did and I don't think it is a good morning, doesn't mean that I should bite your head off, right? So can we self-regulate? Can we understand that even though the pressures are coming at us, the blitz is coming, but that's not your fault. And so I'm not going to take it out on you. Understanding that we all are motivated different and making sure that we understand that not everybody else is going to operate from the same mode of motivation that we do. Understanding the difference of empathy and sympathy. And then understanding social skills. Like I said, that teacher that I had at my school, I know that her heart was in the right place, but she wasn't always able to communicate it well. Why does this matter for you? In project management, in business, why does this matter for you? The reason it matters for you is because if you are aware of yourself, then you can make better decisions. If you have empathy for others, then you can build stronger teams. And if you can regulate your emotions and perhaps help others to regulate theirs, you have fewer fires. That's why it matters. How do we do this? There's a 3-step emotional reset. The first step is pause. Yes, I know. You're thinking, yeah, we're always told, count to 10, big deal, I took a breath. But literally, you need to take a pause. And the second step is name the feeling. I know you're probably thinking, Carolyn, that's so cheesy. That's so cheesy. Why do I need to name the feeling? Believe it or not, when you give it a name, you take power away from it. So if I can name that feeling, then it doesn't have that same hold over me and control what's about to come out of my mouth. The third thing that you're going to do from that is that then you're not going to just react. You're going to choose the next best step. Let me give you an example. I had the awesome privilege one morning, Monday morning, of delivering a professional development for a group of special education teachers. So students were out of school. It was a Monday morning. Needless to say, no one in the room wanted to be there with me. And I was talking about policy and procedure, the topic that everybody wants to hear first thing on a Monday morning, right? And so as I'm talking about policy and procedure, I have this one lady in the front who raises her hand. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, engagement on a Monday morning. I'm thinking I just won the lottery. And then she proceeds to say, let me see if I can get the tone right. I sure wish all of you people at the district office would get your act together and figure out what it is that you want us to do before you come and tell us. Because you just told us something that everyone else told us the opposite to do. I'm thinking, little Miss Ma'am, who does she think she is, right? So my first thought is, oh, no, she didn't. In front of all these people, does she understand this is not the place, this is not the time, and we are not going there? That was my first thought. I stopped. I paused. And I knew that I could handle this a couple of different ways. Like I said, I've got a room full of teachers, and I'm in a role of administration with the district for the district office for special education. And so I know that my next move is A, going to set the tone in that room. Also, I'm going to hear about it later on. And then also, it's going to impact my relationship with all of these teachers from that day forward. So I could react and explain to little Miss Ma'am exactly where she needed to be and what she needed to not be saying. That was one choice. The second choice I could have made was to do what we typically do. Thank you for that response and for that question. We have a very tight schedule today, and so we need to stick to the agenda. If you'd be so kind as to put that in the parking lot, we'll make sure that we get back to you later. Thank you. So we could have done that, right? But what would have happened? Can anybody tell me what would have happened if I had dismissed her that way? Anybody? Amen. She said they would have dismissed me. Exactly. And they would have had that conversation without me. They would have kept on the entire time. So instead, what I chose to do, and it was an absolute choice, what I chose to do was to decide, even if I was lying to myself, I chose to decide that her question was coming from a place not of absolute disdain and disrespect, but of frustration. And I chose to choose and decide that the reason she was asking the question was out of a true motivation to understand. Again, I was probably lying to myself, but that's what I chose to tell myself. So I responded to her in a way from that framework, instead of the little Miss Ma'am, you and I need to talk in the parking lot. Instead, I told her that, I understand that you feel that way, but it's much like, and we'll use a football example, in a playbook, when we have a play, we're all going to interpret it different ways. Or when we're thinking about in business, I have an end goal in mind. That doesn't mean we're all going to give you the exact same way to get there. Or if I have a recipe, we all season it to taste. So the thing is that it's going to adjust each time. It's not going to be exactly the same. And I would hope that you would respect and appreciate the fact that you don't work for a bunch of robots, that you work for real humans, and that we interpret things differently. And as long as none of us are telling you something that's illegal or against policy, that the fact that it's slightly different is okay, right? All right, so we want to actually take a time out. Take that pause. Embrace the pause, you all. There is power in that pause. It allows you the opportunity not just to buy you some time to think, it allows you the opportunity to remain professional. And it also allows you the time, if you need to ask what we might call as a curious question. To ask somebody, exactly what is it that you see that I don't see? What do you think that biggest risk is? Did you see a different way that we could have been doing that? Why is it that you feel that the way that I'm explaining it isn't the direction that we need to go? One of the other things is leading with clarity and courage. How many of you are familiar with the Enneagram personality types? All right, several of you. It's just another one of those ways that we personality type people. I very much identify as a number 9. I'm a peacekeeper. I hate, I loathe, I detest conflict. Absolutely. However, in a role of leadership, we do not have the opportunity to be able to just simply ignore it. So we need to look at the way that we address it. We can either address it in a way that destroys trust or in a way that deepens trust. So instead of, why didn't you get that report in on time like I told you? We could reframe that as, I noticed your report was late. I value that you took time to ensure that it was accurate. I'd like us to, in the future, set a 24-hour buffer to ensure that we're on time. I had a teacher one time. Like I said, I loathe conflict. I had a teacher one time that I had to have a conversation, a coaching conversation with about a developmental plan. And when I met with her and I was explaining to her that I absolutely appreciate and value her passion for children and everything that she was trying to do, but in special education, as in business, we've got regulations, we've got policies, we've got procedures, and that ugly thing called paperwork, that has to be done right. So that was her issue. It was not at all her instruction with children, but it was the paperwork, which will get us in court quicker than anything else. And so when I was talking to the teacher and explaining to her that I valued the fact that she has passion for her kids, But I noticed that her paperwork was not where it needed to be, and that we needed to come up with a developmental plan in order to improve the things that we needed to. She began to cry. And I thought, oh crap, I did it again. What did I do? So I started replaying the whole, like I said, that trust that I lost with that first teacher. That was in the back of my mind. So I'm replaying that. I'm thinking, okay, Carolyn, what did you do? What did you say? And I finally looked at her. I said, I support you. I believe in you. Please tell me what's wrong. And she told me, she says, Carolyn, it's not about that letter of concern that you're writing. She says, I know I should care about that, but I don't. And I said, okay, then tell me what it is. She said, I let you down. I said, excuse me? She said, I let you down, and I will never do that again. Completely not what I was expecting. Not what I was expecting at all. But the whole thing was that she saw and she heard that she was valued. She saw and she heard that I believed in her. And I didn't at all blame her. I was trying to support her. I called out what it was. I didn't ignore the fact that there was a problem that needed to be addressed, but I did it with grace. So the next thing is, it's your turn to make the next play call. Your turn to decide where it is that you're going to go. Like that quarterback in the huddle, yeah, coach is called to play, but as a leader, regardless of what your title is, whatever place that you're in that you've been called to lead, you get to choose whether or not you call that audible. And you get to choose what it is that you're going to call that next play. So we've talked about grit. We've talked about trust. We've talked about emotional intelligence. If you were to think for next week, well, what's the one area that you want to focus on? Take a second. And if you're anything like me, you might need to write it down, because if I don't write it down, it doesn't happen. You might want to text it to your friend and accountability partner and say, this is something I'm going to focus on because I understand the value of the people that I work with. You might be a project leader or project manager. You might be any other role in the business world. But when you're leading people. And so understanding that when we grow in our ability to lead people, that makes all the difference. So you can choose a small act, and I think I'm about out of time. You can choose a small thing to work on, whether it's a simple thing in grit, finishing a tough task, staying committed to something even after that newness and excitement wears off, whether it's following through on a promise that you made or not doing the Carolyn and speaking up in a moment when you should. Maybe it's a matter of listening to the people. Yes, taking that pause. You don't have to count to 10, but taking that pause or asking a curious question before you respond. Understanding that reflection is important and taking that time. Just like businesses don't exist to stay stagnant, businesses are only as strong as the people who are leading them, which means that as leaders, we must continue to grow as well. And growth does not happen in a straight line. It's not a checkbox. It's not a one and done. What we need to understand is that growth, just like football, happens in seasons. Just like life happens in seasons. And no season is ever wasted. Every season is important. We go through seasons of rising. We go through seasons of reflection, through seasons of renewing, and through seasons of thriving. So we've got grit. We've got building trust. We've got emotional intelligence. We've got handling conflict with presence and grace. And then we've got your play call. But the thing about it is the tools alone won't get you to where you want to be. Your team's success relies fully on how effectively you plan, adapt, and implement your playbook. Because you guys, in the end, just like in life, leadership or football, what matters most is not the tally of the wins versus the losses. It's how you played the game. So make sure that your playbook and all of the calls that you play reflect a game well played. Thank you for having me.